So here's that little bonus lesson that I promised you. Now again, you're not responsible for this material, although it will help if you're trying to do all of the bonuses on the final project. But what I said we'd do is I've downloaded and just opened here, I haven't changed anything yet, the 3-tier implementation of our application for the Canada Games, right? So what I have in front of me right now is the library project. And remember, we did it initially just as a read-only, which is why when I come to, for example, the athlete repository, right, well, maybe I'll even go to the interface for it. I only see 3 tasks, right? Get athletes, get athlete in singular, and get athletes by X, our multiple filter get. But there's no CRUD operations yet. We can't insert, update, or delete an athlete. By the way, we're not focusing on maintaining the foreign keys right now, just the athlete itself. Okay? All right, so first thing we really need to do then is come into the interface here, where we defined it for the methods that we want to implement for our repository for the athlete, and we're going to add 3 more: add athlete, update athlete, and delete athlete. And in all cases, okay, they return an integer as a result, and that, of course, in this case, will be the number of rows affected, right? So the idea is that we'll be able to check that. If it's 0, then we know we didn't actually add, update, or delete, right? Other than that, we're always working with 1 record at a time, which is why we pass in a single, not a collection, a single athlete object, right? So we've looked at this kind of code before with our movie one, but we're going to come back now and add this functionality in to the actual repository for the Canada Games. Okay, so here is the implementation. Now you notice at the top, now it's not happy because we do not implement all the methods required, right? So let me come down here. I'm going to Control MO. Yeah, MO. Sorry. So many keyboard combinations to remember. That just shrinks everything down, so it makes it a little easier to work inside the class here. So what I want to do is I'm just going to get the code. We've gone through all this before, so I'm not going to belabor it or take a lot of time. We'll quickly review the code as I put it in, but basically we're just going to implement those 3 additional actions in the same kind of way we did the other day. All right, so here's my insert new athlete. Okay, we pass in the athlete to add, and following the pattern that we did, we'll just get our connection open. Okay, prepare my affected rows, assume it's going to be 0. Then I open the connection and we prepare dynamic parameters. Okay, particularly this is the way to go because we have an output parameter and we can set the parameter direction, but also it's a good efficient way to make sure we're covering everything that we need to, and it's very readable code, less confusing because everything is clearly identified, right? Then we call to execute. So again, I'll emphasize we aren't doing a query, we're calling execute, although it is still a command type stored procedure. We just have to pass the name of the stored procedure and our parameters collection, right? And then we're going to go to the parameters. We're going to get the ID parameters value and set that to the ID of the athlete to add. So that updates the object we have in code to give it the new unique identity primary key generated by the database itself. Now, as we mentioned in our last demo, of course, I'm not actually using it at this point, but we have it available in the repository. Okay, so that's basically it for the add. For the update is very similar. We have our dynamic parameter collection. No output parameters this time, though. And then we call our stored procedure, and away we go. Once more, returning the affected rows. Similar but simple approach for delete. This time I'm not going to bother with dynamic parameters because I just have 1, so I'll use the anonymous object approach just to pass the ID of the athlete to delete, and that's all there is to it. So good. We have all the additional functionality we require. So I'm just going to do a quick build. Build succeeded. It shows me right there in the status bar, but I can check details here as well. All right, so that's it. I don't really need to keep this project open anymore, so I'm going to close this one. And I do have the UI project open. Now, one of the things, because I've updated the DLL, I just want to talk about that when we have a reference, especially because we created 2 totally separate projects, right? Our reference is just to the DLL file, and for multiple reasons. One thing I've downloaded, it might be in a different folder to begin with than it was originally, and of course now I need to update it. The safest way to guarantee guarantee that your reference to a class library is updated. See, it has a little yellow warning sign there. Remove it. Okay, there's not a refresh option, so I'm just going to remove it and just come up here and add it again. Add reference. Once more, I'll browse, come to my work folder, come to the library, go in here to the bin folder, and then in debug, because that's the mode I was in, select the DLL. Okay, click OK, and now I know for a fact that I've definitely updated my reference to the latest version of the DLL that we just built in the other project. Okay, now we have work to do inside here in order to implement CRUD. So I'm going to start with the main page XAML, and then one of the things we set up, how we ran this the first time, I can run it actually, because it'll give us a chance to see the version without CRUD. Just the fact that we've given those additional methods available in the middle tier doesn't affect the functionality in the front and the UI at all, right? So here it is coming up, and I can still get the data. Notice I had my little spinning busy indicator there working, and so on and so forth. I can pick a record, but nothing happens, right? Because this is totally read-only. There's no add option here and things like that. It will, the filter should be fully functional. I can just quickly check that. Filtering just for men, 66 athletes match the filter. Men from Ontario, for example, and away we go, down to 7. So yeah, everything is still working the way it should, but we can't edit anybody, right? So that's what we're going to do next. So coming in here to the main page XAML, right down where we have our grid view, right? Where we have our item template containing the data template for each actual record coming from the database, each athlete, okay? Well, in the grid view itself, we have this set right now. Is item click enabled set to false? Well, I'm going to set that to true, right? And along with that, we have to do one more thing. Okay, now that we can click on an item, how do we handle it? Well, I need my item click event to a new event handler. Okay, athlete grid, athlete list, item click. Okay, so that would have created that. Slightly different name for some reason from what I have in my code, but that's okay. We'll deal with it. All right. Down here, we only have that one button in that panel, that row at the very bottom that always just sticks there like glue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the end of the line, press enter, and I'm going to add another button down here, taking advantage of the relative panel's ability to align things nicely for me. I'm going to set the align horizontal center with panel to true, so I'm adding btn add, okay, and away we go. So this will be my add method. All right, so now that's it. That's all we have to do in the main page UI. So if we come to the code behind, say we've added our item click event here. So what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to get the code in place, and really it's quite simple, right? All I need to do in here is navigate to my detail page, taking the same approach we did the other day, where we create this separate page where we can focus both for insert, update, and we can even use it for delete on one record at a time. Now I haven't made the page yet, so it's going to be underlined. But because we clicked on an item, okay, we have the clicked item from our item click event arg object here. We can cast it as the athlete and pass it as the parameter, as we call navigate, okay, the object parameter to the page itself, right? So I'm just going to throw a bit of a summary comment up here in the top. I navigate to the athlete detail page when an athlete is selected, passing the athlete object as a parameter. There we go. All right, now the other one, I didn't create it from the UI, but I have the matching code ready to go. Oh. Is our add button. So if I just click my add button, which appears at the bottom of the page, okay, we're going to follow the same kind of navigation to go to the details page, but what I'm going to do instead is create a new athlete object, and I'm not going to worry about, you know, the summary property like we did in our last example, but I do want to make sure the date of birth, okay, I don't want any null issues, and you know, I might as well assume that they're at least the minimum age for an athlete, which is 16 years old. So what I can do is take datetime today, use add years with -16, and that'll come up with a reasonable starting date. So at least the end user doesn't have to start from, you know, the year 0 or something like that. It'll be reasonably close when they go to edit and change it to the actual birth date for the new athlete they're adding. Now, of course, it's going to underline this in red until I actually add the page. So let's do that next. I'm going to come up here, right click, we'll add a new item. Again, I always like to show all templates so I can make sure I'm working with XAML and a blank page, right? So what's the name of the page? Well, of course, it's athlete detail page. That's what I have in my code. So to make sure it matches, I'll give that as the name for the page. And there we go. So we have the page here. It has the code behind ready and so on and so forth. So I'm actually going to start with the code behind. And because basically because we've done this before a number of times, I'm not going to make you watch me bring it over a bit at a time. I'm just going to grab all the code at once. Okay, so here's the code itself. Now, it's very much the same pattern of writing code as what we use with our movie example as well. Okay, I'm going to have a view object. Okay, it's the a single athlete, and so it's an athlete class, right? I have my 3, count them 3 this time, repositories I'm going to need. So in the constructor, I use Jeeves, my utility helper here, to get my connection string, and then prepare the 3 repositories themselves. Now, before I get to talking about field dropdowns, notice that as with our last example, we have the onNavigated_to event, right? So here is where, from the main page, when we called navigate and we passed the athlete object, right, here is where it comes in, okay, navigation event args. So we take the dot parameter, which is what we saw the athlete object was, cast it as an athlete, and we assign that to the view, okay? And then down here, I'm going to do a couple things depending on whether we're inserting or updating, right? And I can check that by going to the ID. If it's a brand new athlete, the ID will still be 0. If it's one we're updating, where it was already saved to the database, the ID will have been updated to the proper primary key value using an integer identity, would be a number above 0, right? That's a quick and easy way to determine what we're doing. So I can disable button delete. Now it's underlining because I haven't added the XAML yet. Don't worry, we'll get there. But the other really important thing is we're setting my Boolean variable for insert mode to true or false. Okay. Then we call field dropdowns. Now I'll just maybe mention this. This is a twist on what we did the other day. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the actual lookup values. Same approach, okay, calling our repositories get, okay, our methods. Now again, I'm wrapping that in brackets so I can do a to list, right? Because an IEnumerable is a read-only array of objects, basically. A list is much more flexible because I may, okay, we don't have to. So that's what I'm showing that's new. Alternate way to add the prompt at the top of the combo boxes, but only when adding a new athlete, right? So if you're in insert mode or you're adding a new athlete, we're going to have that extra option at the very top of the drop-down list as a prompt. Select the contingent or select the gender, right? And then that's going to be inserted at the top, but only if we're in insert mode. If we're just updating a record, there's no need to have that there, right? There'll be a current value selected already. They're both required foreign keys. Now that'd be something different. If it was an optional foreign key, yeah, then we could leave an option at the top where the value would be 0, but or null even, well, depending on. Okay. Let me just set that as the item source, away we go. And then now our view, we can set that as the data context of the page itself. Okay. All right. This is the same approach that we did before. And maybe just while we're here, though, I want to share with you in terms of is valid. I've added a couple extra things here that are kind of fun to think about, right? Same logic. We just assume valid is true until we find any issue. If there's any single issue, then we give a message and we set the valid property, the Boolean property of false, or the Boolean to false. Okay. All right. So again, we can do check that the athlete code is a length of 7 and that it's numeric, okay? And that's a little trick there. We convert the string to a character array, and then each character, make sure it's a digit, and so on and so forth. Email. This is an interesting one, Okay. First of all, we make sure the email has been entered, but then I've added an extra little method here to check if an email is valid. How do we do that? Well, there are multiple ways to approach this. This one will get you 99% of the time a good answer, right? It's pretty reliable. I can't say it's 100% reliable in every circumstance, but virtually nothing is these days with the variety of email addresses that are out there. But this is a very good one to rely on, okay? And we'll look at the code for this actual is valid email in just a moment or two. Right, then we have our drop-down list, making sure they aren't 0, okay? And then away we go. All right. Height and weight, okay, making sure we actually have values entered there as well. Same thing for media info, that there's some information provided because it's defined as being required. Okay, that's the same approach, but let's have a look at this. Is valid email. So I pass in the string, the email address, and all we're doing is mail address is defined in the namespace system.mail, right? So what I can do is I can just pass the email address in, and if it can create it as an email address object, a mail address, then odds are it's in a proper format, right? So I'm using the built-in capability of that namespace, this system.net.mail namespace, to actually make sure that the email address can be created as a valid email. And that's a good way to check to see if it is. Okay, now everything else is pretty much as we did before. All right, so let's get to the XAML itself. So coming now to the XAML, once more I'll arrange it in the usual way. So the first thing I'll do here on the actual details page is I'm going to add the namespace that we need for data, right? It's going to be our models folder or namespace coming from the actual library itself that we have referenced. Okay, now in the XAML, right, I'm just going to grab all the code at once. Okay, and it's very much the same kind of layout. We haven't really changed it from the approach used in the movie one. Notice I have a background to the actual grid itself with a little bit of a opaque image to show. All right. Then the same two main row definitions, auto and star size. Then we have our stack panel here for the title panel. Then we have the content panel, right, which is another grid, okay, inside grid row 1 of our root grid, or layout grid, as I think I named it up here. Yeah, layout root. Okay. And again, it has two column definitions so that I can have sort of a label beside the input control, right? And then my row definitions correspond to all the different pieces of information. Now, obviously, as we know, the athlete is a much bigger entity. It has a lot more properties, right? So notice a couple little things here. My height for the row where the calendar date picker, I've given a little bit extra room because it requires it. And something else interesting at the bottom here. Notice this one is auto, okay, this particular row. We'll talk about why that's that way a little bit more later on, but basically, the media info is a blurb that you type that would be, presented about a given athlete, and it's a control that we are going to set so it can grow bigger, right? So if you type more text, the control itself will get bigger in order to continue to show it and hold it all, right? So that's why we have the height set to auto for that one particular row. Okay, then we start getting into the label input control arrangement. So text block, I should say, for the label, text box, so first name, etc., right? Notice that the binding, we're using that X bind because there's just simple binding required, so we can do compile time. So for first name, middle name, and so on, always two-way binding, and away we go. All right. So just for fun of it, let's go down and look at, so here's our combo boxes as well for the lookups, right? Notice we've got the display member paths and the selected value paths all set here in our XAML as well. The binding is we're using not Xbind, but the binding, but it's still two-way, of course, okay? All right, so here's our media info text box. What I wanted you to notice here is that it accepts return as true, okay? And we have a vertical scroll bar visibility set to auto and text wrapping to wrap. Okay, so with all those properties combined, what we'll see is that we will actually be able to type text in there, and it will grow as we actually enter more text, okay, and the horizontal alignment being set to stretch and so on. All right. At the bottom, we have our 3 buttons here for delete, save, and cancel as well. Okay, so that's it. Let's just try running it. We'll see what happens. Guess what? There will be a problem. Build is started. Build failed. Ah, look at that. Invalid binding assignment. Cannot directly bind system date time to system nullable system date time offset. Okay. Use a cast converter or function. Ah, so that is the issue. Up here where we have the actual calendar input, right? Our calendar date picker. The problem is we're trying to bind to the date, which is a nullable, I should emphasize that as well, datetime offset, right? That's the property itself of the calendar date picker. But from the database, our date of birth is a date time. So they're not compatible, or not compatible enough to actually work that way. So how do we solve this problem? Okay. By the way, in the earlier versions of UWP, these actual height and weight would have been a problem as well, because they're numeric data types bound to a text property which looks for strings. So we would have had the same issue there. Now they've improved it a little bit so that those ones will automatically do any type conversions back and forth between the numeric type and so on. But they haven't gotten around to doing that for our calendar date picker. So we have to come up with another solution here. So I'm going to show you the old style fix. Now let me just take a moment and emphasize, when I'm showing you the old styles, I'm usually doing it in my lesson to contrast and compare that to the newer, better ways that we have of doing things now. So you'll understand sort of the history, appreciate why things are better now, and I don't want to confuse you and think you should use the old methods, right? I'm just giving you the contrast so you'll have a deeper understanding of how we got to where we are today, basically. So in the old style days, before we even had binding, we would do all of that. We would get the data from the database, manually copy all the values from the different properties of an object into the different properties of our UI elements, right? Our text boxes, etc., right? We'd do that in code to get the data up on the screen, and then going back, we would take the values out of the UI, out of the page itself, and then copy them over into the properties of the object before we tried to save it, right? Well, that approach could be one workaround here. It's not what I'm actually recommending, but I wanted to give you the experience of seeing that approach, the old-time approach, put into play. So what I need to do here is I need to change mode. Two-way binding, okay, is not going to work for us. You see, notice we have 3 choices. There's one way, which takes the property value from the object that we're bound to and copies it over to the property of the UI element, in this case our date property of our calendar date picker, right? One way will automatically, if there's a change to the object, it would automatically update the UI. One time only ever does it when we first load, basically. When we first do the binding, it will take the value from the control and bind it to the property of our UI element, okay? It'll take the value from the property of the object, I should say. So one time, this should now avoid the issue. Should be able to run it now, because the system is smart enough to do it coming this way, right? So sure enough, no more build error. Okay, we solved the problem, right? So let me pick on Antoinette Weber here. I'm going to come in here, and there we go. So we got the actual birth date brought in. It's displayed properly in my calendar date picker and so on. But what if I were to make a change from September 29th to September 1st, okay, 1998? I'll just do a save. Same age. But oh, look it didn't actually save the change because it's a one-way binding, or even one time, right? So it didn't write the data change back to the object, so it didn't actually get saved to the database. So how do we address that issue now? Well, let me just stop running. What I'm going to do is go into the code behind here for the detail page. And we can manually get the data from the XAML inputs and do the conversion ourselves. So what I'm looking for here is my save, right? Button save click. So coming in here, first of all, we check for validity. We might as well do that, okay? And then before we come in to decide whether even we're in insert or update mode, here's a chance that I can say, okay, I'm going to reference the object that we're going to save here, right? This view object, and make any changes to it manually that I need. So what I'm going to do is manually get the data, okay, from the actual user interface itself and convert it as required. So I only actually have to do this one. So what would that look like in code? It would look like this. Okay? I will create a datetime offset. I'll go to the calendar control, my calendar date picker, grab the date, which is a nullable. That's why there's a question mark there, datetime offset. Now, I can get rid of the nullable feature or concern by using get value or default. That converts it to a datetime offset as opposed to a nullable datetime offset. So that's halfway there, right? So my selected date is a simple datetime offset, no longer nullable. But I can go to the object itself here, my selected date, and use the .datetime method, which is a built-in conversion to convert it to a datetime. And then I can assign that to the date of birth property of the athlete, which is my view object. Then when I go to save my view object, which is my athlete, okay, it will save properly, and this should fix the issue. But let me emphasize once more, although this is a fix, it's not the fix I recommend, right? But we learn a lot by exploring these kinds of ideas. So if I come in here now, I'll do the same change to September 1st, 1998, click Save. I have to come back into details to see, and sure enough, it did successfully save this time. Yay! All right. Oh, by the way, down here, I'm going to show you if I keep on typing, see how it just gets bigger? There you go. All right, I can save that as well if I want to. Okay. All right, good. So that was one fix for the issue, but I'll emphasize again, this is not the fix I actually recommend. The other thing that was mentioned there when we had the build error was to use a converter. Okay? Converters are an automatic way to allow us once more to use two-way data binding, right? A converter will take an object, okay, and convert forward and backwards. So I'll start, it'll make more sense as we get the code in place. So let me come up here. I'm going to keep it organized by first of all adding a new folder. I'm going to call it converters. Okay, so inside my converters folder, I'm going to add a class. This class is going to be my, you can make up whatever name you want, but I'm going to call it this. I'm going to call it datetime to offset converter, because I'm going from datetime offset to datetime, but that's just too long, so I shortened it a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to make it public, and I'm going to have it implement a particular interface iValue converter. There we go. Now of course it doesn't yet, so I'll say okay, go ahead and give me a basic implementation. And notice the structure here. So we have two, okay, methods here, convert and convert back, right? So we get our object, okay, called value, and then we're going to do something with it. Now right now of course we just have our throw implemented exceptions. So let me actually just replace the code here, because I have my summary comments as well. Okay, convert between datetime and datetime offset. Used for dates that will be bound to a control if the control expects a datetime offset, right? Okay, so in the convert, so this is going from the object to the UI. What we'll do is, first of all, I'm checking for null, okay? Always a good practice. If value is null, just return null. That's it, but boom, you're done, okay? Otherwise, we're going to take this object, the value, do a conversion to datetime, and then store that here as a variable called date, okay? It's a datetime type. Then I will create a new datetime offset, and the constructor for it will simply take a datetime, right? And that will create the new datetime offset object, and that's what gets returned. If there's any exception, I'll just return a datetime offset, setting it to the, I have to pick some value, I just went with minimum value, right? Hopefully that never happens. Truth is, I've never had it happen yet, but there you go. Okay, all right, now convert back. In this case, we take the value being passed in this object. Again, I check for null and handle that, just return null if that is null. This time we'll take the value, cast it as a datetime offset, store it as an object of that type. It has the built-in, as we saw in our code, method called datetime that just does the conversion and converts it to our datetime, and away we go. Exception, datetime, minimum value. So this will automatically then allow us to convert forward and backwards. So I'm going to save that. Okay. Now while I'm here though, I'm going to talk about why we might consider, even though we don't have an error, right? We are being allowed to use two-way data binding for the actual strings, but well, no, I guess I will actually finish with the date one first. So let's come back to the main page, or the detail page now. I'm going to go to the XAML of the page. And here we need to do something. I need to first of all add my additional namespace, right? So coming up to the top, I have a namespace for the converters. Okay, now it's just my Canada Games UI.converters. That's the namespace of my converter class right here, right? Canada Games UI.converters. Good. Okay, so I added that namespace. What I'm going to do is at the top, I'm going to add a page resource. Okay, I can define page resources that will be available throughout. Now, it's a page resource because I only need it on this one page. By the way, you can add resources like this to the app object as well. So if it's a resource that you might use through multiple pages in the application, then rather than putting it in the page, put it in the app object instead, right? Okay, so in here I'm going to add my converter, my date time to offset converter, okay? And then of course it's going to find it in the converter's namespace, and it's my date time to offset converter. That's the key. All right, now it's going to underline it, right? Because hey, wait a second, it doesn't exist in the namespace. That's because I haven't done a build for a while. It'll all get straightened out in the end. But now what that allows me to do is come back down, way down here to my calendar, and once more I can put this to TwoWay. But I have to add something else. I have to add a little something in addition. I need to specify as well the converter to use inside the binding expression, right? So that will look like this. So I'm still saying xbind, okay, the date of birth property of my view object, my athlete. Converter, my static resource here found right on the page, my date time to offset converter. Now I can go back to using TwoWay, okay, binding mode, right? Now if I go to the code behind page, now all this is not needed, so I'm just going to comment this out. Does it work? Let me see. And here we go. All right, let's just give it a quick test. So once more, no. I had it wrong. She was born on the 29th. I hope that's the date it was. And I'll just click save. And we'll just confirm here that yes, indeed, yes. No more build errors, no more old-fashioned approach of assigning values. We're successfully just using straight two-way data binding again. Yay! But look at that. The height in centimeters. What if there's, decimal places here and things like that? Well, it'd be nice to be consistent in how that looks, wouldn't it? All right, let me just stop running for a minute. So, as I said, it's not absolutely required because it is basically working, but there are other reasons why we might want to add an additional converter. So I'm going to add another class here to the converters folder, and this one will be a double to string converter. Because I have double is the data type of the these numeric properties, and I'm going to make it a string for display. I'll just add the code here. Okay. Not only are we going to convert between double and string format, we're going to take advantage of the fact that we have opportunity now to give a consistent string format, 2 digits behind the decimal place, right? And that's a nice feature that we're building into the converter with that automatic formatting. Plus, on the way back, users can sometimes type all kinds of funny characters, right? And we don't want that to cause a problem. Actually, before I finish, I'm going to run once more and show you the kind of issue. I should have shown that, but I lost my train of thought there, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the value, toString it as a string, and then do a little bit of work here to basically strip out any characters that shouldn't be there, right? So if somebody accidentally types like a letter or something like that, then that would cause a problem trying to convert it to a numeric result, right? So we're going to create a clean version of our string by cleaning out anything that isn't either a digit or isn't equal to a period or a minus sign, right? And that as well would also take care, if you're working with financial information, quite often the user might be tempted to throw a $sign into the text of the value they're entering, right? Well, of course, that's not going to work very well, converting it to a numeric data type, so that would get stripped out of here as well. Okay. Now, before I finish fully implementing this, let me run once more to show you that kind of a problem. So again, if I type a letter like that, click Save, okay, you see it just ignored it. Certain values, though, will definitely cause issues, like if I have multiple decimal places. Well, nah, let me not do that. Let me throw a $sign in here, things like that. Okay, then look at that. We're actually getting unhandled exceptions and so on. So yeah, there's definite issues why we would want to use a converter, right? Okay, so we have the converter ready to go. I just need to actually get it into the page. So let's come back to the XAML. We already defined the namespace at the top here, but I'm going to add my additional converter. So here we go. I'll add the converter for my double to string. And then now I can come down, okay, to those 2 inputs for height and weight. They already were set for TwoWay, right? But I'm going to get the proper converter in place. Oh. Oh, I selected too much text, sorry. There we go. Double to string converter. And then the exact same code down here where I'm binding the weight. Okay, I think I have that right. So let me do the final test here. Picking on this same, now you see we have it nicely there with 2 decimal places, and I can save that, come back in, and we see that now it's nicely formatted for me. And if I try to put like a $sign in front of one of these values, maybe any other weird characters, things like that, no problem. It strips all that out and just saves the actual numeric value. Perfect, right? So there are numerous reasons why we might even add a converter in a situation like this where technically it's not completely required. All right, well that basically finishes the demo for today and that little bonus lesson. So again, this will maybe help you if you're striving to do all of the bonuses on the final project as well. The final version of this code is already posted up in Brightspace, so have fun.